Man, let me post this piece I made. Already? Oh, let's...
Bree, how do you
Bree,
draw?
Bree, I need your style! Huh?
Do it!
Hey Yappers, it's Bree, and it's time. The long-awaited tutorial. At least one comment under almost every post consists of the following question. Bree, can you make a drawing tutorial for your style? And I held back for the longest time. Not to gatekeep or anything, no. I actually squeal like a kid on Christmas morning when someone gets inspired to draw similar to me because of me. I just really suck at explaining. I used to do tutorials on a very old account that we do not speak of, but I was never good at explaining. And now that my style is somewhat consistent and I have some commentary experience, I decided randomly on the day of writing the script, sigh, let's do it. And I notice people think that my style has changed a lot, or downgraded even, so they might disagree with the consistent part, but personally, at least to my standards for my art, I feel like it's consistent and well improved. Let me explain. But first, the super thank yous. Sorry if I say your names wrong, and I apologize if you aren't here, you'll be in the next one. Wasa Baby Cheese, Kim Dally 1564, Kazuna Endy, and Helpy 2. Personally for me, the only major changes are the rendering style and anatomy. I got a lot better with proportions that mix my personal style, while also somewhat keeping some sort of proper anatomy. I mean, not exactly because no human's eyes are that big, but comparing my old art to my new, the proportions got so much better. At least to where I want them to be. And a lot of people claim that my art style has downgraded due to the rendering style change, and I think that opinion is perfectly fine, don't get me wrong. I see why you'd think that, so I get it, but for me, I enjoy this style of coloring much more because, to be honest, the old style was tiring to render, while this one is more fun. Styles fluctuate and that's okay. My rendering and style will probably constantly switch, even back and forth sometimes just to fit what I enjoy. And a reminder that detail doesn't always equate to objectively better. It's all about preference. I tend to be drawn to more simplistic styles, but also cherish the detailed ones. I don't find one better than the other since I like them both equally, but I certainly find simplistic works more fun to actually work with. And as an artist, if you're tired of the style you're working with, don't be afraid to change it. I know I have this recognizable style now, apparently, since I've gained the achievement of people saying, "That looks like Bree's style," even getting noticed in public because of it. But I guess now, as someone who could say they have a style, it's okay to change it. I've always believed that as well. A lot of people believe that artists will stick to one style and one style only. But I know I found my style, just not in the way you all think. As someone who found their style, it doesn't mean it's going to stay the exact same, despite popular opinion. Artists who are known for a style, no matter how long they've had it, if you take an actual deep look at their style, you'll see those styles that are consistent, especially in social media artists, aren't entirely consistent. I've made a video on the topic of finding your style actually quite a few times, and went over the fact that in order to find a style, we flip through many styles. So having an inconsistent one is actually okay. People constantly stress themselves out over this, especially with social media. Many artists, including myself, seem to have found their style. And it's not something the art heavens just open up and bestow upon artists. It comes slowly. There are many times I thought I found the style, then changed. And that's a part of growing. The style I'm using right now might be different next year. Look at my first video. Look how much I've changed. And having quote-unquote your style also doesn't mean you should confine yourself in a box. My thumbnail art is slightly different than the art in videos. On my community posts, sometimes you'll see me drawing completely different styles far from my usual ones. I don't draw on the style that people recognize as mine because it's my style that I'm known for and quote-unquote made. I draw on it because I genuinely enjoy it. Hence why I'm not afraid to mix it up. We have these unrealistic standards that we as artists need to find a style, stick with it, and keep it forever. But that's simply untrue. The pressure for this needs to stop. Don't beat yourself up over not having a style that people recognize you for. I won't go far into depth on that point though, as I made a whole video on it called Stop Stressing Over Art Styles. Which at this point I should just make an art style playlist of my videos, since I have so many, but that's besides the point. The point is, no style is actually completely and utterly consistent. Let's go with a bigger example outside of myself. A bigger, more well-known, and older channel would also be a great example. Lavender Town. I love her work. She was one of the first channels that I watched in the art space. Actually, when I began to watch ArtTube completely, or whatever the YouTube community calls it as a whole, back when I was about 11 or 12. But there's always this one criticism or really hate that I see towards Lavender Town. Mainly because people usually say it in a not so constructive way when I see it. And that criticism is, Lavender Town's art is bad because the style doesn't change. They say she makes no improvement, which I have to disagree. This topic has actually been on my mind a lot when the topic of style comes up. And I think this is the perfect time to air out my opinions. Lavender Town has a style she enjoys. She's not obligated to keep or lose it unless she wants to. Her work is lovely, and just because someone's style doesn't have insane changes doesn't mean it's bad or lacking improvement. And I bring up Lavender Town as she's a perfect example for this discussion. She's heavily known for her style, and many believe said style hasn't changed. But all art changes over time, even if it's not huge changes in the audience's eyes. But to the artist, there is definitely changes. And anyone who takes the time to look at a piece maybe from a year ago compared to now, I'm sure you notice differences, whether it be proportions and anatomy, or other details in her art. The style is consistent, but there might be small changes that for Lavender Town could be huge or small improvements. Improvements nonetheless. To a viewer, they don't know the artist's goals or where the artist thinks they need to improve, and that's why I brought Lavender up. Also, you guys should watch Lavender Town, I love her. I actually tested this fact with my Black Pearl cookie fan art as well. I posted a redraw of an old piece that I drew of her almost a year ago to show my improvement. But to do a test, I asked my viewers, what do you prefer? The old one or the new one? Now, there was no wrong answer. Whether you like the old, the new, both, or even neither, I appreciated and wanted all answers. Little did I know that it would come in handy for this video. But I took no answer to heart, and only took that to get some hopefully differing perspectives, as well as hopefully some tips. Many said they thought the old was better simply because of the rendering or the color. And while there were some opinions that I personally disagreed with, based on what I was aiming for and what I disliked about the old piece, I recorded my results. Many said that I essentially downgraded, or that I was less expressive, all of which I disagreed with. And I bring this up to show something. People's perception on change will always be different. Just like how people can notice improvements and think they improved or got worse, people could also not notice the changes that an artist sees. Art is always changing one way or another, even if it's on the things like perspective or color. So while you may have an idea of a standard, of a never-changing style to be known as the artist with that style, the idea is unrealistic as art will always change. So it's okay to have changing styles. It's okay that a style isn't always consistent. In fact, when I say that I found my style, I don't mean the overall style. My style is whatever I draw. Your style is whatever you draw. My style may shift, but there's always noticeable elements. Big eyes, round faces, round shapes, 4 with the occasional 5 fingers depending on detail, the dot noses, squiggly blush. My styles throughout the channel are extremely similar while also being different. Even when I try and replicate other people's styles, I notice myself adding little details to it, and that's what makes it my style. I have found my style, but it's not the definition of a style that many think of. Not every piece will look completely the same, and that's okay and normal. But now that we got the art style pep talk over, on to how to draw like Bree draws. Me! I mainly wanted to yap on art style change first, since it's an aspect of art style that I haven't covered, and I thought of it while writing this script. But I wanted to help out on artists and their journeys, and I believe becoming a style chameleon is an important aspect in achieving that. And I also want to note, just because I'm making a tutorial on my style, it does not have to be followed. It does not have to be followed to the T or at all. Many just wondered what my process was, wanted to do style studies off of me, or even just draw entirely like me, and I want to give them a boost. I am in no means of a professional, so I will not claim as such. Please note that. This is also a good time to note, you don't gotta ask if you can draw like me. You don't gotta ask to color like me, to do trends that I do, to redraw my works, trace, as long as you don't claim you entirely did it on your own, since honestly, integrity when tracing is important, nor do I mind people referencing off of me. I don't own my style, I don't own the content I make, and I actually encourage people being inspired by me. So that's my boundaries as far as that goes. And warning for probably terrible explaining. Firstly, I decide a character or character design, a pose, and a color palette before I begin. Pinterest boards are extremely helpful. For fan art, I just get the character references, but for OCs, many of the ones made up on the spot, I think of a design in mind, and sometimes use Pinterest for help. Sometimes look up hair references, clothes references, and more. But to make this video easy, I'll do fan art. Cookie Run fan art because Cookie Run brain rot goes wild. So sue me. Next, I scavenge Pinterest for pose references if I don't have one in mind. Once that's done, I look through color palettes for inspiration, get an idea, and go for it. But a lot of times I color pick, mostly with fan art to get accurate colors. Then I just tweak the colorings and settings later, which I'll do for this video since it's fan art. Now that the drawing preparation is done, to the actual drawing. I'll just give a neck up tutorial since my style is mainly in the face, as well as a rendering/coloring one, and also some detail references for some notable features in my style. So first off, to begin the drawing, I just grab a sketch pen. Sometimes I'll use Baskerville, or sometimes I'll use Procreate pencil, but it really just depends on how I'm feeling in the moment. But basically, I start with the head first. My head consists of like this oval shape that is kind of flatter on the bottom with like a slight point to it. So it's kind of like an egg shape, as if the egg was really pointy on top. Now for the actual facial proportions, I don't usually do lines, but I'm going to do guidelines here just to show you all. Most of the head, it's like Megamind, and it's really big up here, and really small down here for the nose and mouth. And right after I do the head shape, I could do little ears. I don't really usually add the ears, but that's how I do the ears. I'm not going to add it for this drawing, but that's kind of how I do it. It's just little curves, like half a heart, basically. And then for the eyes, this is mainly the most important detail. The eyes, basically, for my style, capture the entire character. You'll notice in my style that the eyes have very, very, very different shapes for every single drawing almost. Like, some of them are similar, but for the most part, it's very different. And that's because the eye shapes actually depend on the character. They depend on their personality, same with the pupils. So for like this character, she seems a bit more laid back and chill, so I might give her more droopy eyes with a round bottom. So for more softer characters, I recommend very round shapes, or soft perceived because twist characters definitely exist. I recommend eyes like this, or like this. And pupils like this, or like this. The pupils will never be the same shape. They could be hearts, stars, squigglies. They could be straight, like squares. They could be rounded squares. It could very much vary. Like, they could be triangular eyes with straight lines. They could be more slanted and giving like this leaf type shape with a diamond look, or even a mix of the soft in it. The eye shapes are so incredibly important in my style because it gives off the personality, or the personality that you want the character to be perceived as. The same could be for lashes because sometimes they're little circles, while other times they could be triangles. For this one, I'm going to do a mix of both. They're triangles but more rounded. And usually the eye lines are not just a line, it will always be like a noodle. So like there will be different colors in the inside of the eye color. I'm going to give her waves in her eyes. She doesn't seem to have any bottom lashes, but I'm going to give her some. The next part I usually do is add a blush right above where the lashes is. Like a very small space. It should always be like a small distance like this. And then to add onto the blush, just a little squiggle. It's kind of like a lightning bolt. And for the eyebrows, since she has a more circular one, we're going to give her circular ones. But I also do triangular eyebrows, just lines, teardrops. So play around with the eyebrow shapes as well. I'm going to actually give it more of a teardrop shape because it seems like she has that too. And then for the nose, it's just a little dot. Or sometimes I make the nose a bit longer, and you can even add like bridge noses, slopes. Depends on what you want. I'm going to keep the nose a little dot though, since she doesn't really have a nose at all, but I'm still going to give her one since in my style I have them. Just a very simple mouth like this works perfect. Now for the hair, I'm going to try and replicate how it looks, but notice how like on like sharp edges, I will mainly soften the look for it. Mainly because again, this is a soft character, so I try to keep more soft edges. But for hair, my style, usually it's like this, like this, like this. Let's make this little head right here. Sometimes the hair will look like this, where it's just little thorns, or I don't know, little banana shapes. I always go for like spikes with straight hair. Or for fluffy hair, we do like a little loop and then a triangular shape. Loop, triangular, loop, triangular, loop, triangular. Even use references. For even curlier or frizzy hair, I just do more of a cloud shape. And basically, I'm going to do a brief tutorial on bodies, but first I start with the neck and the shoulders. And the neck is pretty thin, like right next to, when it's come from this angle where it's like kind of like a 3/4 angle, in a way, I'm not sure what I would even label this. It's slightly to the side, but not like too far, right to the side of the chin. Or if it was centered, I would have just put it right here, just keeping it kind of centered, like both really close to the chin point. But to do bodies, I want to start first with the torso. There we go. And then I give the waist area, which is just kind of pointed where I want it to go, 2 little lines. And then I make 2 curved lines pointing together to the middle, let them cross over. And for legs, it's just little lines. But if you were to do full body, they would be like little marshmallows, where they would get bigger towards the bottom, And I usually don't add feet, I just make them really big nubs. And since she has a skirt on, I'm just going to guide where the skirt should go so I know where to put like this part of the skirt. There we go. Then for the hand, I basically just kind of wing it. I do like this really like kind of like a car shape almost. For this angle at least. And then just add the other fingers. And for hands, they're basically 3 little nubs connected. Little line down, little nub. Then 2 little hoops at the bottom. They're kind of like Mickey Mouse gloves in a way. So I use those as reference for my hands actually, really. And clothes don't have that much detail, but sometimes there'll be little crevices like this. And usually for like points in the skirt, I'll do 1 line here, 1 line here. Same with the top, I will do like a little squiggle like I do for the nose here, and then a little line underneath, just to separate the chest area from the stomach. And there we go, the sketch and layout is done, and now it's time to the line art where I use Baskerville. I usually put it midway to have a somewhat small, but still thick enough kind of vibe to it. Although for points like here, obviously it's really thick, so I'll put it down just a little bit and make it smaller. But I try to keep the line art as clean as possible, making sure the edges are extra round and that lines connect together perfectly. So like right here, it's not really perfectly done, so I'll move it in a little bit more. And I'll continue that for the entire line art. And there we go, the line art, and it always looks a bit under detailed and as if it doesn't really have like anything at all, and that it looks too plain, but trust me, once the line art and the coloring begins, it'll get there. And by line art, I mean the line art coloring. So first off, I always start off where do I want to color first, and usually it's the eyes. I start off with the base color, and once it's done, I begin the shading. So color picking here, I'll just make these little areas right here, similar to the original drawing. And if the colors are way too bright, let's say I was using the pure white for the eyes right here, then I would literally just go and change the canvas color to gray. Most applications have this. I actually might just do it right now, just in advance. And yeah. And then I'll just use a smudge tool and just blend it all up. For the smudge tool, I use the water bleed. It's over in the water area. It works very nicely for smudging and rendering. I also apologize for non-Procreate users. I know this is mainly on Procreate, but there are IBIS paint brushes that can replicate these brushes. I really recommend using Pinterest to look for brushes. That's where I found my other brushes when I used IBIS paint, like Rotten Attraction. They were all on Pinterest. None of them were actually made by me. I've said this many times, but Pinterest is the way to go. And there we go. That's kind of just how I rendered the eyes. I'll do the little highlights here, which are always usually just a solid color. I never really do much with those. And then now that we're getting to the eyes, let's do the eyelashes. Alright, I did the eyes and most of the facial features. So now I'll just do like a little bit more in-depth tutorial on the shading, since this kind of shading doesn't really give that much detail. But the skin and hair definitely does. So the skin and the hair are the same process, but first off, you're going to wonder where the light is coming from. For this drawing, she's angled more this way, so the light is definitely be coming from this way. So that means all the shadows are going to be on this side. I definitely recommend, if you have references, look at where the shadows are, but I'm not using it exactly from this reference, and I have an idea of where I want the shadows to be, but if a light is coming from this way, obviously all the shadows are going to be on the other side of the head. So I'm going to start off by just getting the darkest color, and just shading where the shade should be. So like this here wouldn't hit the light, over here really wouldn't hit it as much. And don't worry if the color seems to be too dark. You can just lower the opacity later if it's needed. Right here, I'm lowering the opacity just in these little areas right here by the finger, since it really doesn't need to be that dark. Then I get out my smudge tool, which the opacity is pretty low. I keep it like around 68, 69. I basically just go in. It's going to look a little messy at first. Get a little bigger, and then it'll make the blending look a bit easier. And I just blend it till I think it looks just right. And then again, I start from the darker area and go up. But if it's starting to get too close to the edge, like right here, I can just start from the lighter areas and go down. Depending on where you want, if it needs more darkness, then start from the dark side, or if it needs more light, start from the light side. And again, same process. I'll make it a little bigger to make the smudges bigger, to make the blending look better and more clean. Because I've noticed with the Procreate smudge brush, at least for the water bleed, the bigger it is, the better it blends. There we go. This area doesn't need that much shadow, so I'm going to make it a bit lighter. Then over here, it definitely needs a bit more shadow, so let's do that. Then there's a little bit of blush, so I'm going to go for like the blush area, but make it a little bit more red. So just make it slightly more red than the area it's at. It depends on the skin tone as well, but let's see. We're just going to make 3 circles. 2 on the cheeks, and then 1 right in the middle, right over the little squiggle. And then we're going to use the blur and just put it like about 15-16%, and that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I usually merge layers. I know a lot of people think I might be a monster for this, but I like to keep a low amount of layers, so I merge them all. And then I'm going to go for the lightest point and use that just to add a little bit of lighting. Now that we're good, we're just going to blend it in. The nose doesn't really need to be blurred as much as the other pieces, but I will like tap it lightly just to get like a slight blur to it. I merged all the layers down, and now I want to try and get that like little dented look that's always like right here that I have in my pieces to kind of give like a more 3D vibe to my drawings. So for this, I'll get one of the darkest colors here. Not the darkest, but one of the darker ones. Let's get a little darker. There we go, that's pretty dark. And then I start from the base of the nose, right under, and slope down. And then it scoops up by the cheeks. Kind of like a little hill. And then since I'm at an angle, this slope will be a bit lower than the other one. But it will swoop right back up. And that's how that should look. Let's lift it up a little bit. There we go. That's how it should look. And then we get the blur. Then we get the blur and blur it a lot. Let's smudge that down since it seems to be going up. And then I get the eraser. Size it up pretty big. And make this straight line that goes up. So it's not entirely erasing the blur that you did, but just for the middle part and leaving some on the sides. And then what we're going to do is blur it again, but slightly. So there's a very significant line in the middle, but then blurred on the sides. And then we're going to mess with the opacity until it looks right. And right about here it looks fine. And there we go. It's similar for the hair and the clothes as well. For the hair, the shading will obviously be like right down here, since the point of light is getting lower, so then there'll be more shading here. All of this will be shaded. All back here will be shaded. Here will be shaded. Here will be shaded. All back here, since it has stuff blocking it. Here will be shaded. Right under here, and all of here will be shaded. For the clothes, always shade right here, on the sides, and then in the middle of crevices, and then depending on where the light's coming from, on the sides as well. Here, down here, but leaving a tiny square right here, leaving a tiny square right here. And that's how the shading should really look, but like as very messy guidelines. Not that, ignore that. But yeah, that's how that should look. And now the coloring is done, and we go over the line art, and we make an extra layer and clip over it, and we begin coloring the line art. This is a little hard because I gotta think about what is the top and what is the bottom, because we have to layer it properly, or it'll be very hard to color the line art. So for me, I'll probably start here. So for me, I start in areas like the eyebrows and eyes. And then slowly work my way around other areas, or else stuff like this happens. I'll also be using different layers. Since I have a place to color pick off of, I can just color pick the line art here and then just use it over here. But for people who are using different colors where they're going like this, so let's say that I didn't have the line art colors, what I would do is color pick the area right here, and then pick a color, and then slightly change it, until it looks right. So like right here would be a fine color. A little bit too light for like up here, but for right here, it's perfect. But just go around the face and just keep color picking. Now that the line art is finally done, what I do is duplicate the layer after I've merged all of the line art layers. I go to the blur, slightly blur it, probably about 5%, 4. Then lower the opacity to about 45 to 50%. Then I merge it down and merge all of the layers together. And then I use the color balance to just edit the colors however I please to whatever I like. And yeah, that's kind of it. But yeah, that's a terribly explained tutorial for those wanting to study my style. I decided to mainly just explain the head since that's the key part of my style and what makes it recognizable. The coloring and rendering is a bonus because that's my top question asked. I hope I can be helpful advice and study-wise. I don't know if this was really helpful at all though, but maybe. I'm sorry it took so long to come out, but yeah. Remember not to stress over having an art style, or if you do have one, don't stress over keeping it the exact same. Whatever makes you as an artist happy and comfortable drawing, that's what matters. There will always be some sort of crowd for you, and many supporting you as you grow as an artist. And with that, I think that's all for today. Thank you all so much for almost 125,000 subscribers. Let's try and reach 130 by the end of the month. I love all the support and I thank you all for being here this long. Even if you just view my channel, I appreciate your time. With that, keep drawing. Remember to love your art, love others, and love yourselves. Bye-bye!